So in the last class session, we were discussing the 17th, 18th sutras, 17th and 18th. As I mentioned in the last session, this part of the Yoga Sutra is highly philosophical, maybe could be slightly dry, so, because we have to remember this is one of the 6 systems of Indian theistic schools, 6 philosophical systems. Vedanta is the top. Below that there is ritualistic philosophy. Then there is Indian logic called Nyaya and Vaisheshika. It's called Indian atomism. And at a still lower level we have Sankhya and Yoga. Now, this Yoga and Sankhya philosophical systems are very profound and very logical, especially in their approach to the status of reality and the relationship between cause and effect. So I shall try to explain. In Indian philosophical systems, there are innumerable schools which explain the relationship between cause and effect. Well, I shall give an example. Vedantins, for example, believe that the reality is one, and that is one attributeless, impersonal, transcendental, immanent, omnipresent, divine truth that is present in all of us. And everything else in this world, including this world, empirical phenomena in which we live, are real but not absolutely real. In total contrast to this, the dualistic system of the most extreme type, for example, the Madhva system, tells you that everything is different from everything else. So that is true for them. Now, in the context of Sankhya and Yoga philosophy, both these schools of philosophy will tell you that there is nothing that comes into existence for the first time. In other words, the effect pre-exists in cause. Technically, if you go to Indian philosophical classics, it's known as Satkaryavada. Sat means reality, Karya means effect. So the effect, that is the Karya, already exists in cause. It pre-exists. It is not it's not that something new comes into existence. In total contrast to this, the Nyaya or Vaisheshika, Indian logical system. You have to remember, the most profound Indian logical philosophical systems evolved around 2600 BC. It is attributed to a great sage called Gautama. So, if we go to modern interpretations, English translations, expositions of Indian philosophical systems, of which the most simple and straightforward interpretation is found in Dr. Radhakrishnan's Indian Philosophy, Volume 1, Volume 2. In the Volume 1, you find he deals with the Nyaya, Vaisheshika, and so on. But don't ever imagine that it is the whole of it. Dr. Radhakrishnan happens to be the most modern and the most articulate and the most easily accessible to the English reading public. That's all. And among those who expounded Indian philosophical systems in 20th century, after Vivekananda, Radhakrishnan is unique in many ways. But there are, in the Encyclopedia of Indian Philosophy, published by, mostly in the United States by one Mr. Porter, he has included hundreds of articles by the most profound Indian philosophers, and often interpreted in English language. Those of you who are interested can go to them. So what I want to tell you is, one school of philosophy tells you that the effect pre-exists in cause. It's called Satkaryavada. It has got many, many streams. Advaita is one. But Advaita tells you the cause doesn't really become the effect. The cause only appears to become the effect. This empirical world is actually not different from Brahman. When you look at the world without associating your interpretation, without associating yourself with time, space and causation, then this world is absolute reality. You are not seeing the names and forms, you are looking beyond names and forms. This is Brahman only. So the world is nothing but the reading or interpretation of the absolute reality within this framework of time, space and causation. These are names and forms. Remove them, the world. That's why Jivan Mukta, you heard of Ravana Maharshi sitting there, staring at something. What is he staring at? What is he seeing? His eyelids never close. I'm just giving one example because the picture, photo is so well known. There are many even greater thinkers, greater philosophers in India. But Ramana Maharshi happens to be the most well-known photo, picture in Western world. You look at his eyes. What is he looking at? Where is he living? He is looking at all of us, but he is not seeing all of us. Looking at us, he is seeing Brahman only everywhere. That's why he is not disturbed, he is not worried, because he is looking at the whole thing. He is looking beyond time, space and causation, beyond names and forms. This is Advaitic vision. This is one school of Satkaryavada which believes that effect pre-exists in cause. Another school is Sankhya Yoga, where they believe that effect pre-exists in cause, but the cause becomes the effect, really speaking. It really becomes the effect. Not that it appears to become. It's called Parinamavada, or the school of evolution of the cause into effect. The Indian Advaitic interpretation is called transfiguration, that is Vivarta. In contrast to this, the Sankhya view is transformation, like the oil seeds becoming the oil, it cannot go back to seed form, like that. Now, in these sutras, Patanjali wants to tell the Buddhists, one school of Buddhists, especially is called in a Buddhist approach nominalism, where they believe the universals and generals do not have an ontological reality apart from the names. So I should try to explain this. So this is called the Buddhist nominalism. Now, so I want to really quote some of the original verses from this. Now what they say, these Buddhist philosophers, whom Patanjali is referring to, and whom Patanjali wants to express his difference from is, they say that the essence of meaning of a word is negative in character. In other words, if you say this is a glass, what you are talking about is this. You are excluding all other contradictories, all other possibilities. That's what, you cannot really explain things in the affirmative, you can only explain in the negative. So if you say this is a pot, you are excluding all the contradictories. Anya poha means all other possibilities are ruled out. In other words, things do not have, a word deals with only conceptual images, which are all subjective mental constructions without any ontological reality. So this is the Buddhist view. This particular school of Buddhism is called, Vijnanavada, or it is called Yogacara. They became known as Yogacara philosophers because they used to practice yoga. Many of them made great contribution to yoga psychology. That means a word denotes the negation of contradictories. For example, when we use the word cow, for example, it doesn't, you are not really talking about an animal with certain properties and characteristics. What you are doing, the word, the cow denotes the exclusion of all other objects other than cows. You are ruling out, you are excluding all non-cow objects. That's the only way you can understand things. This is the famous approach So a word can only express its meaning by rejecting the opposite meanings, by avoiding all the opposites. This is the Buddhist interpretation of a reality. Technically it is called Apoha Vada, it is called. So, in other words, it is an exclusion of all others. Now this is exactly the opposite of the philosophical view of the yoga philosophers like Patanjali and Sankhya philosophers like Ishvara Krishna and others, because they believe that external things cannot be ruled out. If things are not just mental constructions. So they give their argument is this: if you are when you are not aware of certain things, when you transcend the empirical plane, when you are not aware of all these external things, it doesn't mean that they do not exist. So, the ontological reality of objects do not depend upon your perception of those objects. Objects do have an ontological reality, not dependent upon your perception. But Buddhist subjective idealists will tell you that things do not have an objective reality apart from perception. This is their view. There is an element of truth in that, and only an element, of course, you know. Why? Because when you are not aware of certain things which are affecting you, for example, hunger, when you are listening to wonderful music, or if children playing computer games, they won't be aware of their hunger. But hunger is not non-existent. For some time, they do not perceive it, but that non-perception doesn't amount to non-existence. So Buddhist philosophy will tell you that reality of the ontological reality of external things are exclusively dependent upon the perception of those things by the subjects. So this is the view. Now, to fully understand this, the Buddhist philosopher's view, again you have to know the background, you know. To know a picture, you should know the canvas. So why did Buddhist philosophers propound this view? If you really want to know the philosophical background of many of the wonderful, the great Buddhist ideas that floated in this country, in Europe and also America, from around 1960s onwards. The mindfulness is just one of the several waves that emerged in the wake of the spread of Buddhism in this country. In fact, Suzuki couldn't do that, but the large migration of Buddhist monks and America's contact with the heartland of Buddhist philosophy, the Far East, Vietnam War, Korean War, all that, the Second World War, Japanese occupation, all that actually brought American mindset into contact these philosophical systems. But you know, philosophy was never a very favorable topic in this wonderful land of innovation and technology. Okay, so that should be admitted. So what happened, you know, very often these plants don't have enough soil to take roots. That's the main problem. So I will try to tell you to go a little deeper. So you should remember the Sankhya philosophers, that is yoga philosophers, they are the same, because yoga psychology, yoga philosophy, Patanjali's yoga philosophy takes all his philosophical doctrines from Sankhya system. So they accept that external objects do have an ontological reality, whether you perceive them or not. This is the Sankhya view. So Patanjali is eager to contradict another philosopher's view which was prominent during his time. Of course, you have to remember, most probably Patanjali, we don't know, we are not sure that Patanjali is actually talking about Buddhist philosophical ideas, because these expositions were written in books which are commentaries on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which were written during the post-Buddhist period. That means during the by great interpreters of yoga system who lived after Buddha's time. So what happened, the later interpreters of yoga system imply that the yoga view actually contradicts the views of Buddhist Vijnanavada or subjective idealism. Now, actually, there's a reason why the Buddhist subjective idealists established or emphasized the point that mind or chittam, it's called Vijnana. Vijnana means a mental platform in which all ideas float, come and go. So you perceive a flower because the flower idea already exists in your mental system called chittam vijnana. Due to the force of circumstances, you happen to connect your mind with that flower, so the flower is perceived to be flower. It already pre-exists. So apart from the perception, these universes do not have any real ontological reality. So chittam or mind is real. Everything else is unreal. Objects are unreal. The perceiver's chittam, mind is real. So they floated this idea to contradict a still former, a much more powerful philosophical system called Shunyavada, who refuted that mind also doesn't exist. So they completely negated even the possibility of the existence of mind. So in order to contradict the Shunyavadins, Vijnanavadins, they said no, mind or chittam exists. But the external objects that you perceive do not have an existence independent of the mind that perceives it. Now Patanjali's expositions or yoga philosophers, they come and tell you, no, things do have an existence. The reality of external objects doesn't depend upon the perceiver's mind. They do have an existence. So that is the philosophical background to be kept in mind when you read these few sutras which I mentioned, Sada jnatas chitta virtayahat tat prabhogo purushasya abarinamitvad. This is the sutra. So what it means is, so the Patanjali tells you that behind external objects, behind the chittam, there is something which is more eternal, more lasting, that is Purusha, that is Atman of Vedantins. So Purusha is real. And Patanjali implies that even Chitta is not an absolute reality, as the Buddhist subjective idealists want to argue. Because mind changes. And mind sometimes fails to perceive things. So anything that is subject to changes and mutation, as they call it, cannot be the absolute reality. So behind the external objects, there is a perceiving mind, and behind the perceiving mind, which is of course all the time changing, there is an unchanging reality, that is Purusha. It is aparinami. That's the meaning of the words in the sutra. Aparinami means that which doesn't undergo parinama, evolution or change. So I shall try to explain this in the light of Swami Vivekananda's interpretation, because those of you who read Swamiji's translation may get an idea of what exactly this sutra and really what exactly it implies. The states of mind are always known Because the Lord of the mind, Purusha, is unchangeable. So that reading of this should be understood. I shall try to explain. The states of the mind are always known. So means, so sada jnataha chitta vrutteka tat prabhogo purushasya abhirinamitvad. So chitta here is mind. So anything that is known cannot be the absolute reality, because the knower is greater than the known. The perceiver is greater than the perceived. The seer should be greater than the seen. The subject should be greater than the objects. So that should be understood. So what the Sutra implies, look at Swamiji's translations. Those who have got the book will understand easily. The whole gist of this theory is that universe is both mental and material. So compared to material, the mental is more real. But the mental also changes. So there should be something which is beyond my mental. That is the spiritual, the Atman. And that is Purusha. So whenever you use the word, you understand, you read about Purusha in the context of yoga philosophy, you should remember this Purusha is interpreted by Vedantis as the Atman, but the concept of Atman is certainly much more transcendental than the way Purusha is interpreted in yoga psychology. So you can read Swamiji's lectures, translation. The whole gist of this theory is that the universe is both mental and material. The material world changes all the time. No, and moves all the time. So who recognizes, who perceives, who feels the movement? Something which doesn't move. If two trains are moving at the same velocity, if you are sitting in one of the trains, you find it doesn't move. But once one train is slow, the other is faster, then the one who is sitting in the train that is moving slowly may feel the speed of the other train which is moving faster. Now suppose there is another train which is stagnant and is moving at all. That person who is sitting in the train which is stationary, which is not moving, can feel the movement of the train that is moving at 30 miles an hour, and another train which is moving at 60 miles an hour, and another train which is moving at 100 miles an hour. So what is the unchanging, the unmoving, the eternal? That is Purusha. So Purusha can see everything. Purusha is drashta, the perceiver, the subject, the unchanging witness, of which the material world, the evolutes of Prakriti, and also the mental world are only objects. So in Vedanta there are two words that should be understood, drishya and drashta. Drashta literally means the one who sees, the one who perceives, the one who interprets. Drishya means that is seen, perceived, interpreted. So with your eyes you can see various kinds of flowers. Red flower, green flower, white flower, and so on. So for the eyes, the flowers are the objects, the seen objects. But behind the eyes there is a mind, which actually is the drashta, the seer, so far as the eyes are concerned. So for the eyes, the flowers are seen objects. For the mind, eyes are the objects, because you decide what you want. When you open your eyes, I want to see this. So the mind is more subtle than the eyes, and eyes are more subtle than the objects that I see. But behind the eyes and mind, there is one reality, which is the real seer, which is unchanging. It's like a train that is stationary, that doesn't move. So you can see hundreds of trains moving at different velocities, because it's remaining the same. So that should be understood. So both these are in a continuous state of flux, means movement. Both material world and also the mind, which perceives the material world, are changing. What is this book? It's a combination of molecules in constant change. One lot is going out, another coming in. It's a whirlpool. But what makes the unity, what makes it the same book, the changes are rhythmical. In harmonious order, they are sending impressions to my mind. And these pieced together make a continuous picture, although the parts are continuously changing. Mind itself is continuously changing. That is the idea behind. So, if mind is changing, chittam, mind means chittam, changing, and that's called vijnana in the Buddhist tradition, then you can't say that things depend upon the mind. The external objects are unreal, only mind is real. Because mind also is changing. If it is changing, it cannot be real in the true sense of the term. So Patanjali, in a way, his view contradicts the views of Buddhist subjective idealists. So that's to be understood. The next sutra is, this another one, Nachaika Chittatantram Vastu Tad Apramanagam Tada Kim Syad. That is, this sutra is not found in all manuscripts. That's why it is often given within brackets. That is, so if you accept the view that external objects are real or they exist only when you perceive them, then what about the times when you don't perceive them? Apramanagam, when they do not become objects of perception or knowledge. Do you mean to say that they don't exist? So that is one of Shankaracharya's famous arguments. See, people have a wrong feeling that Advaita is idealism. Advaita is not absolute idealism. Advaita is a harmonious blending of absolute idealism and absolute realism. Frequently, you have to be very much aware of this problem. Very often, when Advaita is interpreted in Western philosophical structure, they often try to make it out as some kind of monistic idealism. That's wrong. Because actually Shankaracharya takes pains to prove that there is a strong realistic element in Advaita. So, in fact, in Brahma Sutra Bhashya and elsewhere, Shankaracharya writes paragraphs, pages after page, to tell you the fact, to tell you that this world is not totally unreal. This should be understood. He says this world is a reality, but not absolute reality. So according to Buddhist philosophers, for example, they will tell you that dream and waking states are equally unreal. In waking state, you see an object. They exist only so long as you perceive them. In dream objects, you see an object, we wake up, they don't exist. So, just as dream objects are real for the dreamer, so also waking objects are real for the one who lives in waking stage. But Shankaracharya tells you that dream objects are real for the dreamer, waking state objects are real for the one in waking state. So their reality cannot be totally negated, but you cannot say that they are totally real. They are absolutely real, because in dream objects, waking state objects are not perceived the same manner. There is a change. So the idea is, Shankaracharya writes pages after page, Brahma Sutra Bhashya, Vijnanavada Nirasaha, that means refutation of Vijnanavada. You know what it means? What he says, external objects do have a reality. Their reality doesn't depend upon the perceiver. But they are not absolutely real. So, and he says that dream is not totally unreal, because dream will influence your mind. A person who wakes up, sometimes dream experiences will have lasting effect on human psyche, human life. So how can you say something that affects your life in waking state is totally unreal. So he says, they do have a reality. So that's why you find Advaita or non-dualistic philosophy of Shankaracharya is a unique blending of absolute idealism in the sense that Brahman is only reality, everything else only relative. And at the same time, really realism, because he emphasizes the relative reality of the empirical. That's the greatness of Advaita Vedanta. So, this particular sutra, Nachayaka Chittatantram Vastu Tada Pramanagam Tada Kim Syat, this is an idea put forward by Patanjali, most probably because some crude form of subjective idealism must have existed during Patanjali's time, which took it the form of a compact philosophical system during the time of great men like Vasubandhu Dignaga, who wrote some famous treatises on the Buddhist nominalism. So now go to the 16th sutra. Tat uparagad apekshitva chittasya vastu jnata jnatam. So that means mind, chitta, is not absolutely stable. Sometimes mind understands things, perceives things, sometimes it doesn't perceive things. Therefore, mind or chittam cannot be the absolute reality. Now we have finished the 18th sutra. Now we'll come to the next sutra. Of course, I want to continue this 18th sutra interpretation of Swami Vivekananda. Swamiji says, Natu swabhasam drishyatvad. So this should be understood. If you read translation, you find the mind is not self-luminous being an object. So that should be, what it means. Self-luminosity is a word in Vedanta and also in Indian philosophical system. Suprakashakatvad means if you have to, if something has to be objectified, something to be known with the help of something else, then that object which needs some other help to be known cannot be self-luminous. I think that's clear. Swayam Prakasha means something which is self-revealing. Well, this is frequently explained in the light of one great dialogue in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So I have discussed this in some of the Sunday lectures. There is a very interesting dialogue in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which actually expounds the principle of self-luminosity. So whatever is to be revealed, whatever stands in need of being revealed by something else, some other light, is not self-luminous. See, for example, to know there is a book on this table, you need this electric light. So electric light reveals this book, which means this book is not self-revealed. It can be revealed. Its existence comes to light, can be known only with the help of light from another source. So it is not self-luminous. So this meaning of Suprakashakatvam or self-luminosity principle in Vedanta. So I shall try to explain this in the light of a dialogue. So in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad there is an interesting dialogue between Yajnavalkya, who is a great sage and philosopher, a great saint and philosopher, and a king, a philosopher king called Janaka. So it is called Jyoti Brahmanam. Brahmana means a section in the Upanishad. So Jyoti means light. Jyoti means something that reveals itself, that reveals other things also. Now remember, a light, an electric light or a lamp can reveal other things, but they had to be made a light by lighting. You have to put oil or you have to use electricity, then only it becomes then only it acquires the property to reveal other things. So the light comes from something else. So there's a dialogue. So when Yajnavalkya, the great philosopher, saint, came to the philosopher king's court, Janaga's court, Janaga asked him some questions. The first question is, King Jyotirayam Purushaidi means, the simple question is this: how do people live in this world, move about, see things? What's the light that enables you to live, to sit, to move about, and to live in this world? So the simple answer is Surya Jyoti, the light from the sun. That's what everyone will tell you. Then the first four questions are very elementary. The fifth question is actually the most philosophical question. So then the king continues his questions. Astamide Surya Yajnavalkya Kim Jyotirayam Purushaidi. Suppose the sun is set in the west in the evening or night. What light enables you to move about? So the philosopher saint tells him, the king, well, it is Chandra Jyoti, the light from moon. So if there is no sunlight at night, of course, then moonlight helps you. Then the third question, Astamide Surya Aditya, then Chandramasi Astamide Kim Jyotirayam Purushaidi. Suppose there is no sunlight, there is no moonlight, there is no the total darkness. What is the light that helps you to know things, to move things, to function as light? No, what is light here? Light is not something that you live with a matchstick. Light is symbolic of knowledge. You lit a matchstick to know what it is lying in front of you. So when you have light, the existence of something is revealed. So light means something which reveals existence. It is existence that is light. So light doesn't mean physical light that you can manufacture with electricity or whatever it is. So light is self-revealer, and it reveals other things also. So suppose there is no sunlight, no moonlight, then what do you do? Well, you start a fire, a flame that can function, that can play the role of sunlight or moonlight in total darkness. But suppose Shantayam Agnu, suppose there is no fire, no flame, no matchstick, no sunlight, no moonlight. What is that light which helps human beings to know about things, to do things, to live in this world? Then the fourth answer is word, speech, voice. But suppose you're sitting in a dark room, no sunlight, no moonlight, and there is of course, no lamp, no fire, no flame. And how do you know about a car moving in the street? Somebody shouting. How do you know a man is knocking at the door or a car is moving in the street? What is that which gives the knowledge of the existence of a car in the street, of the existence of somebody knocking at the door outside? So that light is equal to existence, because light gives you the knowledge of the existence of something. So then the answer is word, voice. But suppose you are in a dark room, you are deaf, there is no sunlight, no moonlight, no flame, you can't speak. What is the light? That's the most profound subject here. You may still sit somewhere and remember things that you heard earlier, or right now you can't hear, something's happened to your ears, let us say, you can't hear. But you have heard many things in the past. You may be tuning a music that you heard 10 years, 15 years back. You may be seeing in your mind the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge. So you are not seeing with open eyes, but you are seeing at the mental level. And also you may smell even. Mentally you may be living in a different world where you can see, you can smell, you can touch, you can hear everything. You remember. So what is that light that brings to your mind, brings back to your mind all the knowledge, all the memories, all the impressions that you had experienced in the past? There is something in you that plays the role of a light. That is Atma Jyoti. Then Yajnavalkya says, when you have this Atma Jyoti within you, then only you will be able to make use of the sunlight, the moonlight, and the light of the sound, and the light of speech. So all other lights borrow the ability to function as lights from the supreme light of lights. That is called Jyotisham Jyoti, means the light of all lights. That is Atma Jyoti. So the real light within us is Atman. In the Sankhya philosophy, Purusha is that light. As I mentioned earlier many times, Sankhya philosophy is a springboard to Vedanta. But only springboard, penultimate state. Sankhya metaphysics is considered to be inherently wrong. But Sankhya analysis of human mind and the world is absolutely scientific, fully understood and appreciated and accepted by Vedantins. Conclusion is, it is essentially a dualistic system. So there is that problem. So we study yoga to understand Vedanta better. So in traditional Indian way of training, without studying yoga and Sankhya, you cannot really study and understand Vedanta texts. Of course, logic is necessary, ritualist philosophy is necessary, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, all that necessary. So this yoga and Sankhya philosophy takes you closest to the real understanding, correct understanding of Advaita metaphysics, Vedantic metaphysics. So this is really the meaning. Nadu swabhasam drishyatva, the sutra. What it means is tremendous power, Swamiji says, tremendous power is manifested everywhere in nature. But it is not self-luminous. See, Swamiji gives one funny example, Mighty big locomotive, a big train is moving the tracks. It could crush whole mountains perhaps. A tiny insect is moving along the tracks. But there's a great difference between the two. The mighty locomotive, it cannot move according to its will. A driver has to apply brake, or he has to function as a driver. The locomotive cannot move independently. But the insect can move. It can step out of the track and save its life. What does it mean? The presence of the self-luminous Purusha is much more in the tiny insect, but is totally absent in the locomotive. So that's why Swamiji says tremendous power is manifested everywhere in nature, but it's not self-luminous. The locomotive is not self-luminous. It cannot use his brain and think and, well, let me stop here. It cannot do that. A driver has to make a decision. Not essentially intelligent. The Purusha alone is self-luminous. So in the tiny insect, this Atman, the spiritual reality, the divine truth is more present, so he can decide and gives his light to everything. So the Atman, the soul, which is present everywhere, which is omnipresent and immanent, that alone can give light to other things which function as lights, but they have to borrow their light from this Atman. That's called light of all lights. So that's why Natu Swabhasam Drishyatvad. Because the human mind is an object, something seen, Drishya, an object. So it cannot be the absolute reality. As the Buddhist subjective idealists argue. That's how that view is refuted, and the Sankhya view is accepted. So remember, I am not on either side. I am just expounding this text. You should not say I am against Buddhism. People, those who don't have training in the dialectical philosophical discussion, they will think, oh, this Swami is not against, is against, not at all. I am just expounding a traditional text, so which is only an introduction to higher and more profound philosophical journey. Thank you. Namaskar. Now you can questions according to your needs. Okay. We can have interactions.
You have not told what Patanjali said.
What Patanjali implies is that even the mind, chitta, is changing. So it is not self-luminous. Nasvabhasam, it is not self-luminous. What he say, you should continue attending next week also, you will understand. Then Purusha is this self-luminous reality. And that Purusha is interpreted in Vedanta as Atman. This idea behind. So, this is a continuing class, So, as you regularly attend, you will understand everything. Thank you. Yeah.
Who is earlier, Buddha and Patanjali?
Well, Patanjali lived earlier. So what the conclusion among these analytical scholars is that the idea associated with subjective idealism did exist in Patanjali's time. Patanjali doesn't refer to Buddha. But the Vyasa Bhasha, it is not a Vyasa of Mahabharata fame. Another Vyasa, and then Vijnana Bhikshu and many other Bhoja, they Vajaspati Misra, all these great Shankaracharya, all the great exponents of yoga philosophy who came later lived during the post-Buddhist time. So that's how, so when you expound an ancient philosophical text, very often you compare and you point out some of the different views. It is part of writing a commentary on an established text. Go on. Wanted to say something? No, let us go. No, he'll come back to you later, just very soon. No, please, somebody behind you is trying to ask some question. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you later. Yeah, come on.
Does the Shunyavadins admit something beyond the mind?
Shunyavadins don't really accept anything because the interpretation of Shunya itself as the absolute reality is, this is a very serious question. I shall try to explain this in the light of a quotation from Shunyavada. You know what Shunyavadins say? Evam chana nirodhosti naja bhavosti sarvada ajadam anirudhanchas tasma sarvamidam jagat. This is Mahaya. Okay. But you know what it means? There is neither existence nor non-existence. The reality is unborn. It is imperceptible, indescribable, non-definable. At the same time, it is non-dual. That reality is called by the Sanskrit word Shunya in Sanskrit. So, Shunyavada was expounded by, but very clearly articulated by Nagarjuna in his Muvela Madhyama Shastra. Is called Madhyamika Karika. So, Dve Satye Samubhasitya Buddhanam Dharmadeshana Loka Samvruddhi Satyamcha Paramarthataka. So, this is also this Nagarjuna, Muvela Madhyama Karika. You know what Nagarjuna says? Dve Satye Samubhasitya Dharma Deshana. Dharma Deshana means exposition, teaching of Dharma. Based on the interpretation of true fundamental truths. What are they? Samvruddhi Satyam and Paramartha Satyam. Samvruddhi Satyam is like Vyavakarika, I mean the relative, the empirical, reality, the relativity of Vedantics. Paramartha Sattva is actually very similar to Advaita's Brahman, the concept of Brahman, but Nagarjuna is using a word which later led to many misunderstandings. The word he uses is Shunya. So what is Shunya? Shunya is the absolute reality which is beyond description, beyond words, non-dual in nature, and beyond explanation, can only be experienced. But the problem is, the word Shunya in Sanskrit language, in the lexicon, means emptiness. So often in the translations of Sunyavada text in English, the great void, the great emptiness, actually it is totally different from what Nagarjuna actually talks about. What he means, something which is imperceptible. That's the real meaning, it's a technical meaning. Shunya. Shunya doesn't have, it cannot be limited to the word meaning in dictionary. In a computer, you will use the delete, save, all those words in computer, You look at the dictionary, computer vocabulary which is used today in today's information technology, exclusively doesn't correspond to the dictionary meaning, the books, the lexicon. Like that, there is a philosophical vocabulary that should be explained. So very often, when these texts were taught through translations, and during translation you lose most of the jewels and diamonds and gold, you get only copper at the most. This is what happens, unfortunately. I can give an example. Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, when translated into Indian vernacular, Kant will turn in his grave. Because languages belonging to another culture frequently fail to really translate the true implication of Kantian philosophy. That is true of many Western philosophical systems when translated into different vernaculars. English may be the best way to language to translate because it comes closer to the German. So what I mean to say, Shunya in Nagarjuna's mind has nothing at all to do with the dictionary meaning in English lexicon of the word shun. Emptiness. It is not emptiness. It is something which is imperceptible, inexplicable, indescribable. It's a transcendental reality. That's why, Dve satya samupasitya buddhanam dharmadeshana loka samvriddhi satya means empirical worldly truth, and Paramartha, Satyamcha Paramartha, the absolute reality, the truth. That's what Nagarjuna actually used. This I am quoting Nagarjuna. So what is the absolute reality? Shunya. That's the idea behind.
Following question.
One more question. Yeah.
If Shunya can only be experienced, then there must be something to actually experience.
Yeah.
So
that's why Shunya doesn't mean nothingness. Shunya is the technical term used by Nagarjuna in Sanskrit to denote the absolute reality. So the whole problem arises from the literal translation of the word Shunya into emptiness or void in English. So that's me. Okay, come next.
So then, what is you mentioned absolute reality when you were discussing Purusha,
yeah.
And then you also mentioned absolute reality when discussing Shunya.
Yeah.
So, what is the difference between these two?
Really speaking, Nagarjuna's understanding of Shunya is the same as Brahman of Advaitins. Nagarjuna uses words like Advaita and so on, non-dual, all those are used by Nagarjuna in explaining Shunya. So very often, it led to a lot of misunderstanding. That's what happened. So it is called, in Nagarjuna himself says, it is Satyam cha Paramartha. It is Paramartha Satyam, the absolute truth, the transcendental absolute truth. That is Shunya. So again, we cannot easily get over the hangover of the translation of the word Shunya. Even in Indian tradition also, Shunya in Sanskrit language means emptiness, nothingness. totally different. That's what, not Nagarjuna, what he meant. So very often, there was a long gap, about 400 years after Nagarjuna's passing away. Buddhism took a back seat in India, and of course it traveled to many other countries also. So in the process, it got its real meaning got lost. The same thing happened to Advaita. Today we are discussing Vedanta here because Vivekananda brought it modern world in the late 19th century. Otherwise, we won't be discussing Vedanta here. It will be limited to a small number of pundits in India. So like that, Buddhism also, there are some great Buddhist lamas who have interpreted Shunya in the right, correct expression. So very often, when you depend exclusively on English translation, the emptiness, E capital, or the great void, V capital, I think English language is not at fault. You should remember. I don't say that. I mentioned to you, Kant or Aristotle, when translated in Indian vernaculars, will completely lose the true meaning. You'll be terribly misled. So it happens. A philosophical work, when translated into a different language, frequently will lose some of its essential implications. It happens. I think we are already okay. Yeah, no comment. We come later.
This reminds me of Buddhist phenomenology, your discussion today.
Yeah.
But I just want to share this one experience. I spent a lot of time in nature for many, many years. And there is a language of the birds. And each bird has its own language. And we identified the type of bird it is. But there's another thought here. Even if I didn't know the type of bird or the language of the bird, it will still be real. So
That is true. Again, the reality of the bird and its language and the sounds it makes doesn't depend upon our own perception. Right. But certainly you're right. That's what that's what yoga says. That's what Vedantis also say. That's why Shankaracharya says, objective world does have an existence, reality, not absolute reality. Modern physics also will tell you. Another point I want to remind you about is, you see, this school of philosophy that we discuss now, this Buddhist approach, nominalism, this Apohavada, which I mentioned, that means the word meaning of any object corresponds only to the total exclusion of everything else. It doesn't denote anything. When you use the word, this is a book, what it means is you are ruling out, you are excluding all other contradictories. So like Anya Apoha, Sanskrit word is used. Anyway, what I want to tell you, these Buddhist philosophical doctrines developed maybe around 400 years after Buddha's passing away. So that we must keep in mind, that wide gap. Buddha didn't really expound these ideas. What we discussed just now is a philosophical doctrine that evolved more than 400 years after Buddha's passing away. That should be kept in mind. Shunyavada or Vijnanavada.
Well, this is actually the second coming of the Buddha with Nagarjuna.
Nagarjuna. Yeah, they believe. Yeah.
He was referred to as the second Buddha.
Yeah, they believe that. That's true. That is the Madhyamika school of Buddhists. Of course, the Vijnanavada tell you that Dignaga is the second coming of Buddha, according to them. And so that's view. Yeah, that's their view. Okay, thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ram Krishna Paramastu.